At Rubber Band, we empower each other through positivity, kindness, and practical advice. Join a community of thousands of peers who understand the unique challenges you face. Rubber Band. Company agnostic, low ego, high empathy, always supportive. Finding the right people is tough enough. Then onboarding them effectively, managing them well, and supporting their progression is a challenge, which is why we're delighted that this podcast is sponsored by Avature. From sourcing to onboarding, talent mobility to performance management, Avature delivers the full spectrum of recruiting and talent management tools that leading organisations need. With Avature, you can manage the entire talent lifecycle from a single platform. Visit avature.net and discover why Avature is trusted by 110 of the Fortune 500. Are you a founder, a HR solo operator, or the leader of a HR team? Do you feel like you're constantly drowning in back office tasks? HR, payroll, onboarding, IT, it never seems to end, right? Well, it's time to simplify. With Rippling, imagine managing everything for your local and global workforce in one single platform. That's right. HR, payroll, onboarding, even IT, all seamlessly integrated. No more juggling multiple vendors or dealing with frustrating tech issues. Rippling does it all effortlessly. Free yourself from the admin grind and give your employees an experience that they will love. And here's the best part. For our Rubber Band listeners, Rippling is offering an exclusive deal. Get your first 3 months for free. Yes, you heard that right. Just visit rippling.com/en-au/rubberband to claim your offer. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to streamline your entire operation with Rippling. Rippling, one platform, every workforce needs it. Welcome, listeners, to today's episode of the Rubber Band podcast, where I am joined by extra special guest, Prashant Iyer, for a recruitment chinwag. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I live and work on, the Wadawurrung and Dja people. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I would like to extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Here he is, Prashy, my mo bro.
How good. I know people can't see us, but if they jump on our LinkedIn, they will see the salt and pepper that I'm running with today.
Likewise, mine's actually it's very much salt and pepper. I agree. It's kind of,
more salt than pepper, I reckon, for both of us.
I remember when we were the young recruiters stomping Collins Street, right? That feels like a lifetime ago.
Mate, counting the pavement, Collins Street. Wow, death by coffee, I used to call it in recruitment. But gosh, there was some good days though.
There were some good days. It's funny to reflect on it, and just funny, like so many of us have kept in touch. Like we all competed with each other back in the day in our agency days. There was yourself and Dan Marsh and Carolyn Iglesias, and we're all still connected. It's incredible.
I think it's the beauty of the role, to be honest. And I know we'll probably talk about it a bit later, right? So you actually created some really memorable friends and networks and meaningful ones too, right? Where you can actually just. We probably haven't spoken for as much as we would like to, but the reality is the moment you jump back on the phone, it's like, we talked for years together, right? So I think it's the beauty of the network or the industry, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm really excited to talk through your career, Prash, because you're someone that, has worked in recruitment. You've then, worked in industry, you've gone back and then you're doing something really interesting now. So I'm excited to walk through your career and to hear all about it and hear what you've been up to since, we used to compete back in your Porter Allen and my Ensure days. But why don't we go back to childhood. Tell me about growing up, and tell me about family and all of those wonderful things first, Prash.
Yeah, awesome. So Prashant, I was born in India. So I was born in India. My parents migrated here in 92, I think, so still very much a first generation migrant, I think, as you'd call it. And I say it openly, given that the population and the community that we live in, that, my parents literally uprooted their entire lives. So me and my sister could have really good lives in Australia, right? So, which, there's a lot to be said for parents that make those decisions and sacrifices and whatnot. But hey, so I call myself, born in India, but, Aussie through and through. I mean, Australia's been life for me as far as I'm concerned. But they grew out in the western suburbs of Melbourne, down at Hoppers Crossing, played a lot of cricket down that way, went to school out that way. But also, just obviously professionally, I know we'll talk about professionally a little bit later on, but yeah, plenty of really good life experiences I think I've been afforded to, thanks to my parents making those decisions largely for, uprooting and giving up everything that they had to come to Australia.
And did you go to high school around the area, around Hoppers? Were you a Werribee? Tell me about school.
Yeah. So school-wise, so when we first moved out to Australia, we lived in Oakley. So I went to Murrabina Primary, which I don't think actually even exists anymore, or there's a bigger school down that way. But then we moved out west. So ended up going to Hoppers Crossing Secondary College, where pretty much everyone went to Hoppers back then. And through that, obviously, played local sport, local footy, local cricket, all that kind of stuff, mate. So, grew out west and then got older and, moved sort of in the suburbs of Melbourne and now live in Hillside, which is sort of, northwest suburbs of Melbourne.
Uh-huh. So when you were in high school, so it sounds like you were quite a sporty fella. What were you into and what were you thinking in terms of where career might come into?
Wow.
We're all too young to be making those decisions, right? When we're in our late teens, but
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. That's such a good question. And the story is that I actually think my personality today is polar opposite to what I was like at school. And it sounds really weird, but I think, I just think life has brought that out for me at least anyway. But yeah, look, school-wise, mate, when I finished school, I actually wanted to study law.
Oh, wow.
Which, I don't know. I mean, look, that must be an Indian thing, right? You either become a lawyer or an engineer or something like that. But I wanted to study law. I didn't end up doing that. I actually ended up going into computer science initially, right?
Oh.
Very quickly learned that that's not me at all either. And then ended up studying accounting at uni and also learned that that's not for me either, by the way. So I was like, anyways, get it over and done with so you've got a piece of paper. But yeah, growing up, compared to what I do today and what I've done probably for most of my professional life is actually very different to what I was thinking of when I was a schoolmate.
So interesting, isn't it? Same. I have to say same. Always thought that I'd be in doing something arty, creative, and I followed that florist pathway for quite some time. But if I was to look at my teenage self and say you're going to be a HR leader, I'd laugh, right?
I'm the same, mate. And it's exactly what I say. I think even you could ask people that actually even went to school with me. I think, let's say, the formative years around to the year 9 to year 12 or whatever. And if you ask them, hey, what did you think Prash would do back then versus what I'm doing today? There is no way in hell they would say that, he's destined to do X, Y, and Z or whatever. I think even just my mindset of what I want to do versus what I want to do now is just completely different.
So did you then, you talked about computer science, you talked about accounting. Did you go to university after high school?
Yep. So I went to uni. Computer science lasted about, I think, the first semester because I very quickly learned that this is not for me one single bit, right? I think it sounded good in theory. I was like, oh, God, no, this is not me. And then I thought, look, why don't you do a sort of broad-based sort of business sort of topic, accounting, and then, which was nice to begin with, but then I very quickly realised that, I can't see myself doing this as a career, at least anyway. Good foundational knowledge and whatnot, but yeah, definitely not a, a lot of people who go, oh yeah, you go study accounting and then you do a cooperative year at KPMG and then you become a chartered accountant and then you stay a chartered accountant. Or I was like, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah, right. It's interesting.
I learned that very quickly. But in saying that, lots of good learnings as a result anyway.
Of course. And that's what it's all about, right? It's all about the journey. It's all about the experience. And we take something from everything, whether it's right for us or not. And that makes us the professionals that we are. Did you have what was your very first job? Were you working when you were in high school, or did that come later? Tell me.
No. I my parents were very, very good that way in terms of encouraging, when you turn, 14 and 9 months or 15 or whatever it is, to try and find a job. My very, very first job, because I remember this to an act, I can actually recall every single detail of this job. I rode my bike to a local nursery. I think it was called I think it's now called the Chris and Murray Plant Farm.
Oh yeah. The Bear Root Rose Sale.
That's right. I remember riding my bike up one of the main roads at Hoppers to this nursery saying, hey, look, I'm looking for some work. Have you got anything? They're like, oh, yeah, sure, no worries. Just drop your bike there, mate. We'll, move these pots around and blah, 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 and we'll give you, $20 at the end of the day or whatever it was. I'm like, oh, yeah, no worries. So anyways, I do that. I think about 3 hours in, I said to the lady, look, I'm really sorry, but I can't do this.
Right.
She's like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, I thought you wanted a job. I'm like, yeah, I do want a job, but I can't do this. I'm like, you don't have to pay me. You don't have to do anything. Do you mind if I leave? She's like, yeah, absolutely, mate. Just thank you for letting me know. And just, so I left. Anyway, so that was my very, very, very first employment story. But then, like every good person does in Australia, I ended up at McDonald's. I worked at Macca's for about 3 years. I mean, if you haven't worked at Macca's, have you really lived? But, Macca's was great. It was, again, a whole heap of people that I went to school with. We all worked at Macca's after school and whatnot. And, obviously, McDonald's has got a great reputation of training and skill development, which I know is still really valued, professionally in many companies as well. So yeah, I did Macca's for a long time, mate. And so I think that pretty much through sort of senior school or high school. And then, yeah, after that, bunch of contact center work here and there and everywhere. Yeah.
Fantastic. So what was your very first professional role?
Yeah. So what did I do? So I finished uni and stuff like that and ended up going overseas to play cricket, thanks to my cricket club at Hoppers. They had a partnership program over in the UK. So, and again, like the whole gap year thing was a really big thing particularly when I was sort of growing up, when everyone was sort of going overseas for a year and whatnot. So what a great opportunity. Go out, play cricket and see, for me, got to see Europe, as much as I possibly could when I was over there, mate. So by coming back from that, I sort of thought, all right, financial services is probably the career where I want to head to. So I actually came back, worked at MLC in the call center.
Nice.
And I thought that was, for me, a really good way into sort of actually going into financial planning. So I wanted to become a financial planner, right? But just, circumstances in life had it that I ended up sort of going down the leadership path at MLC, which I'm sort of still very grateful for. I was there for about 7 years, but I had, I think six different jobs in 7 years and saw various parts of the organization. So that was my sort of my first professional roles, I guess.
Was that in the MLC building where AIA is now on St Kilda Road?
No. So MLC were in the midst of transitioning. They had a building down opposite Crown Casino.
Okay.
But it was a very small building, but they were actually moving to the Lego building in Docklands when I started. So we were one of the first teams that moved into the 800 Burke Street, I think it's, or Collins. Yeah, 800 Burke, I think it's called. So that big Lego block that's there down in Docklands, we were one of the first teams in there, which was fascinating because, I mean, that area now, it as well, mate, gosh, we were the only building in that area and now it's surrounded by apartments and other corporates in there as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. So at some stage, you sort of were developing your career in the kind of service side of MLC with a view to go into, wealth management or financial planning yourself. At some stage, recruitment came into the mix. How did that come about?
Mate, so funny story. So as I was probably about 6, 7 years into MLC, right? And really wanted to go down the whole concept of relationship management, business BDM, all that kind of stuff. I was like, wow, this sounds awesome. And I could just see those guys running around, winning deals. I'm like, that's it. That's what I want to do, right? But in saying that, there were none of those sort of junior sort of opportunities for me to come up. And I just said to my manager back then, look, I really want to go do this. She's like, look, you know what? You need to leave this place and go find that work. So she, and then one of the agencies that I used to use when I used to do recruitment when I was at NLC, they just I said to them, hey, look, I want to do this. What are your thoughts? Can you help me out? And Ian Dempsey, who was my first manager in recruitment, I know he's in Brisbane right now. He just said, mate, you'd be great at recruitment, right?
Yeah.
And said, look, we don't have anyone who does superannuation and that kind of stuff at Mark Satin. So that was the first agency that I worked with.
Yeah.
He said, look, we don't have anyone that does this. Great opportunity for you to sort of start something fresh. You clearly know people. You're not shy in talking. We reckon you'd be awesome at this. So that's how I fell into recruitment.
And were you prior to David Hooker? I remember him being at Mark Satin at the time.
Yeah, David was there. So David was, I think, one of the guys who interviewed me. So,
right.
So David, Ian, and Damien. I think Damien was another guy that used to work.
Oh yeah, Damien. Yeah.
Yeah. So David Hooker was definitely one of the interviews that I had through that process. But like I said, I wasn't thinking about recruitment as a career or anything like that. But then it's sort of, and I'll still say it, the best decision I ever made. And I'll tell you why a little bit later on. But
yeah. I want to hear that, but I want to know when you were catching up with Ian and David and Damien or whoever at Mark Satin and going through that interview process, at some stage you thought, you know what, I want to give this a crack. I think this is the industry for me. Yeah. What was it that made you go, do you know what, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, so look, I think for me, what really appealed to me was, I guess, the ability to look at the industry that I've been working in from a very different lens. Like, when you're in an industry, you kind of just get your blinkers on and you just go, all I know is wealth management. But then, and I think the way Ian and Dave and, the way they spoke about how they work with candidates and obviously their clients, it just, for me, was really refreshing to go, oh, look, what a wonderful way to not only, one, build out your network, see how other organizations work and, who's good, who's bad, all that kind of stuff. And also for me, sort of come back to the point of wanting to be that relationship manager or BDM as a career perspective. Well, I just sort of thought, well, these are the soft skills that I need to develop, and this industry can provide that to me, right? So I was like, it's a no-brainer. And also the fact that Ian said, hey, look, you'll be recruiting into a industry that you already know about.
Yeah.
That gave me the comfort as well. But for me, I think the decision-making was the ability to develop the soft skills that I ultimately want to do in other roles.
Okay.
That was the clincher.
So you saw it as a bit of a stepping stone in a way.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%, mate. I actually remember, so when I started at Mark Satin, the good old, remember those days when clients would bring us in for those job briefs and we'd all come into a room together and we're all trying to go, oh, geez, what notes he taking, all that kind of stuff, right? I remember, I forgot the lady's name, but she said to me, look, Prash, you'll either last in this job for 3 weeks or you'll be here for 7 years later.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, oh, that's a bit strange to say to someone who's just started and, all that kind of stuff. But I actually agree with her because it is an industry, and mate, you've obviously done this as long as I have, if not more. There are people come into it sometimes with false sort of ideas and thoughts, and it just doesn't work. But for me, mate, I still say, like I said openly, the best decision I made because for me, actually, really, my soft skills are thankful for what I've learned in industry that I still use day in, day out.
I agree. And I think the trap that a lot of rookie recruiters fell into, particularly in our day, I mean, there was a glamour to our industry. We were Collins Street power suits, a lot of successful people that we were reporting into and really highly successful consultants making a lot of money. The reality of that glamour, as soon as you hit the desk, goes out the window, right? So, I think you need to have a maturity behind you, and you need to have a lot of experience in terms of life experience behind you, or a previous career. I think if you step straight into recruitment, it is not what it looks like from the outside.
No, I think you're right, mate. And don't get me wrong. Like, I remember when, Ian was like, "Oh, Prash, you can make X, Y, Z money, when you jump into this role." I'm like, "Oh, wow, that sounds awesome." You know what I mean? So don't get me wrong. That was really appealing. But, I remember when I made the move from MLC into recruitment, I just got married and took a bit of a haircut on my salary to go into recruitment. My wife's going, "I'm not sure this is the smartest decision you've ever made." You know what I mean? Yeah. But I'm like, hey, with your commissions and blah, blah, blah. She's like, yeah, let's wait and see, right? So, but in saying that, look, I think you're right, mate, in terms of people come in with that sort of glamorous view of it. It's unless you put the effort in, it's not going to work. That's how I take this industry. Like, you actually have to put the effort in, and the results will only come as a result of that effort. Otherwise, it's sort of wishful thinking.
Totally. And it's a grind, right? It's hard work. And I don't think people realize that until they're on the tools.
What's that famous saying about, was it recruitment is either champagne or razor blades, right? Someone said that there. And you sit there and go, look, you have your absolute highs, but then you have your absolute lows, you know what I mean? And if you're not one who can deal with that roller coaster day in, day out, gosh, find yourself a different industry.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's keep going through your career. What came after Mark Sutton? Where did you go from there?
Yeah, so after Mark Sutton came Porter Allen, which was a really cool experience. And Porter Allen was awesome because essentially came on the back of one of the clients that I used to work with, I should say, at Mark Sutton. She's like, "Oh, Pash, this agency's recruiting. We think you should work with them because I think they were on all the panels and all that kind of stuff." And Porter Allen was great because, it was almost a greenfield opportunity. Brett, Colin, myself, Gavin sort of started the Melbourne sort of fraternity of Porter Allen, and we sort of grew that, over the years. But, part of a much bigger organisation, I think People Bank and whatnot. So, look, great opportunity. So, again, came in as an RM there, sort of then managed the Victorian business for a few years before I actually went back into the industry as well. So I think I was at Porter Allen for about 6.5, 7 years all up.
Yeah, you're there a long time. You actually interviewed me there at one stage. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah, I do remember that. I do. And I think that after that, I think you ended up at AIA through that time or somewhere in that time.
I think what happened, it was around the time I was at Ensure, which was, for listeners, it was a Rubicor insurance agency, and I'd been there maybe about 4 years, and I wanted a bit of a change. I think I ended up going to Roban at that stage, and then after that, I transitioned to internal. So, yeah.
So the Porter Allen was great, mate. Look, obviously, again, a niche recruitment business. And again, it's just, I just feel like recruitment's provided me professionally so many opportunities, career-wise, soft skill development, professional development, personal development, which you sort of go, you don't get that in many industries, and you can work in roles or sectors for years on end and still not have access to any of that, which I think both you and I got to learn and observe and now get to share through our experience.
Totally. And then at some stage with Porter Allen, you decided you wanted to go back to industry. Or I shouldn't say back to industry, but go to industry.
Yeah, go back to industry, mate. Yeah. Look, I think it's one of those things, like opportunities sort of just come knocking. And so, ended up, so after Porter Allen, I ended up at First State Super, now we're Super. And again, it was for a relationship manager role, the role that I'd sort of wanted to do when I was leaving MLC, sort of said, hey, look, this was the opportunity. It ended up being aware for 7 years, and again, got, fortunate enough to receive many opportunities over that time, run many different teams and achieve some great things. But it was just, and that opportunity came because one of the leaders said, hey, Prash, we're looking for an RM. But then I had another person saying to me, well, mate, you actually would make that good RM. So just before you think about recruiting that job, maybe think about doing the job. So that's how it kind of came up. And again, I'm super thankful for it.
Yeah, so you recruited yourself. And then you were there for ages as well. Like you,
so I'm
really well in your career.
6.5 years almost, I reckon. Same thing again. came in as an RM, managed the Victorian business, and then ran the education business nationally as well. And that sort of, fund, from when I started to where it is today, the fund's, it's a $190 billion fund now. I think it was about 80 when I started. So grown exponentially, but equally as a result of that, the opportunities that were afforded to myself were brilliant as a result of that.
Amazing. And then we'll talk about your latest role. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what I'd be really keen to hear about is throughout your career, your industry career and your recruitment career, what have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned, Prash, over the years?
Oh, gosh, I reckon this is a big list. So I'm going to try. I'm going to try and narrow this down. I think for me, I think the power of both like tailored coaching, individual coaching. I think as a leader, I've spent most of my life as a leader, and you have too, mate. And, I think what I've learned, there's no one size fits all advice when it comes to running teams, leading teams and whatnot. Everyone needs their own individual sort of ways of communicating, talking, dealing with their own challenges in the way. So I think, the power of tailored coaching and tailored conversations, I think they were underestimated. It's probably what I was going to say. I think the other one for me is, the importance of clarity. I think, especially these days, and, keen to hear your thoughts, mate, but I think these days it's very easy to get lost in the noise, right, that's around you. And you forget what really matters and what you're doing, what is it actually ultimately for, both whether it's for yourself or the people that you're leading or the business that you're part of. So I think, whether that's in leadership context or sales development or, there's something to be said about simplicity. What I mean? And I just don't think, that's something that I think we lose over time, because either we overcook it or we make it more convoluted than what it needs to be. And recruitment's a perfect example, right? Where I think the best recruiters are the ones who do the basics really well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think, there are a couple of things there that I really do agree with. Like, I think we have a tendency to overcomplicate leadership, but leadership's all about an authentic connection between two humans and to be able to help each other develop. It's two ways, right? So I completely agree with that. I think a lot of, there are always the trendy methodologies that pop up and then they go and then another one comes and people get really into it and that this is our leadership framework, which is all well and good. But at the core of it, it is that connection, right? It really is. And getting the simplicity of that connection, right? Going right back to basics, as you said, is key. Without it, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. I think, there's that sort of, you just got to be open to it, because I feel like sometimes as you progress through careers, we almost feel like we need to complicate everything, but we actually don't. I think as the career evolves, I think we need to actually get back to the basics a lot more, because we forget that. I think another big one for me, I think it's topical that we're talking about this today as well, is actually not being afraid to lead with a bit of vulnerability. And it's probably not something that I was really comfortable with or, certainly wasn't open and sharing. But I think, when you learn to show your human side, with your struggles, your challenges, your growth, I think it actually, talking about authenticity, as you really well said, it actually helps build that trust and makes your leadership or your style a little bit more relatable, you know what I mean? Because people connect with that authenticity and hopefully it creates a culture of, others sort of feeling safe to do this. I mean, look, and we're doing this as we talk about Movember, right? You work on Movember, you're both doing Movember, and, vulnerability is there's something that's, such a topical thing because people, blokes don't talk about it. That's the reality of it. It doesn't matter whether it's your personal life or you won't even talk about it in your professional life. So I just think, that's something that I continue to learn. I don't think I'm perfect at it, but I think I've learned the power of leading with vulnerability. Certainly through my professional career, I didn't see that in sort of male leaders that I had. It just wasn't heard of.
Yeah. And I agree. And it was how we kind of grew up. like we didn't talk about our feelings, right?
No.
And then I look at my father's generation and forget it, right? Like completely closed book. you never know how he's feeling, aside from the fact that, you know, he might have steam coming out of his ears and looks really angry. But, you know, it's just the way we were raised. And I think as leaders, we need to tap into that. And as men, we need to be talking, which is why Movember is so important. But, you know, we're not here to talk about Movember, but I think it's an important thing in terms of purpose as well, as you were saying, in the work that we're doing. And as leaders, we need to be connected to what that purpose is and why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. And just maybe to build on that, I think the one thing that I would say as well, and whoever's listening to this, whether you're a leader or you're an individual contributor, I think one thing that I really appreciate today, and again, probably comes back to the organizations and people that, you know, I got the chance to work with, was, you know, being allowed to invest in other people's expertise and not feeling like you've got to have the answers and you should know everything. You know, I actually find that, you know, I think the really good leaders actually make it a priority to invest in themselves or their teams by getting experts to come in the door, right? Yeah. Rather than pretending to be the expert for everyone. Because let's face it, we're not experts.
No.
But I think we sort of, again, I don't know if it's old habits or culture or whatever, but we just sort of don't want to admit it. And we feel like as a leader, we've got to have an answer to every single thing, which is so BS, you know, in my opinion. Anyway.
No, I agree. Prash, what are you most passionate about? Whether it's work or personal life? What brings you joy?
I think for me, I'm passionate about, I think if I look at professionally and personally, you know, I'm one about how do you have a really positive impact on people, right? How do you create, and I mean that in a really lasting way of not just professionally, but also personally. I think as a leader, I've always said, hey, if someone can have a conversation with me and if that helps them lead that conversation better equipped to deal with their challenges or, you know, their life a little bit better, I feel like I've done my service, you know, to the universe or to the community, right? I think that's what I'm passionate about. But how that comes out, I think for me, you know, professionally, it's all about, I guess, how do you help individuals or how do you help teams really uncover what really drives you, right? But then enable them, right? To actually, because I think one thing's to come in and get a good rah-rah motivational speaker and all that kind of stuff, but then you have to go back to your desk and go, crap, now how do I do any of this, right? So for me, it's about finding that balance between both, not only being able to hopefully, you know, encourage and inspire, but then also empower people to actually take on that action.
And that's what you're doing now. That brings us to your current role, doesn't it?
Yeah. So brings me to my current role. So again, mate, life throws you opportunities that I say when it does, grab them with both hands, right? So I've recently started working as a principal consultant at EnableIQ, and ultimately what the EnableIQ is about is helping organizations and individuals sell more effectively and more consistently, right? And which we both know, right, in today's business, you know, everyone's got really complex sales sort of procedures or processes, or, hey, we've got bigger targets to hit, but we don't have the people or the resources. So it's about how do we do that? Now, whether that's, you know, coaching your frontline team and helping their own capability, are they spending the time in the right types of activities? And when they do those activities, how are they doing them? But then, you know, one thing we were talking about, you know, sort of offline was helping the leaders actually coach their teams. You know, it's so often we see businesses going, oh, come in as a consultant, you'll solve my problems. And here I am and go, well, actually, if we're not in this together, we're not going to solve the problem.
That's right.
So how do we sort of not only connect with the frontline team, but then also hopefully connect with the actual leaders? How do we coach them? And then we've got an amazing digital platform. So if anyone wants, you know, if anyone's interested in sort of a bit of sales training, hit me up.
Link is in the bio, everyone. Hit him up. Prash is awesome. So I love what you're doing, and I think it's really important. And we were talking about it offline. I think the trap we fall into as leaders is that we're just constantly running. I think we've got so much pressure, whether it's within a sales environment or in a recruitment environment like myself or talent, right? Like we're running in order to produce outcomes, right? And to get the job done and to succeed in our functions. And, you know, having the opportunity to partner with EnableIQ and yourself is to be able to take that step back and be able to be trained to train others and really understand the importance of that and being able to stop running. Because
yeah, spot on, mate. I think it's also about knowing when, and equally in saying that, there'll be plenty of clients that we're perfect for, but there'll be some clients that we're probably not the right person for or the right time at the moment, right? So I think it's about knowing, and sort of coming back to my earlier point of knowing that there is some value in engaging with external expertise. No different from recruitment days, right? When a lot of the organizations would engage with their panel of recruiters and not the internal teams and whatnot, or a combination of both. So you sort of need to know as a business, where are you at and what's the right bench strength to help you? Is it within the organization or is it external to the organization? But then also, how do you do it in a way? I kind of feel like, because we want everything instant gratification as a society at the moment. We want everything now, right?
That's right. And the pressure is so high and the expectations are so high that we put on ourselves.
Exactly right. But then what normally happens as a result of this, and I'd love to get your thoughts, is we actually, whatever change we make, it's not sustainable. It only works for that one thing and it falls over.
Yeah.
Right? Because we haven't created sustainable change or empowered sustainable change. So we can say to that team, hey, you don't need us anymore because you can run with it. Because we feel like we put the Band-Aid on, but then the Band-Aid's off.
Yeah. And everything's a Band-Aid approach these days. You're absolutely right. Because we just live in such a transactional society where we want everything done immediately, right?
Yeah, it's so true, mate.
It's so interesting. True. I love what you're doing. I think it's really wonderful work, Prash. So congrats again. We're at the end of our Chinwag. So what would be your final piece of advice for our audience?
Final piece of advice. If it comes to, because I think career is a really topical thing at the moment because there's lots happening around, organizational restructures and redundancies and new jobs and all that kind of stuff. I would say to people, no matter what your situation is, give everything a go. Don't hold back. Have plenty of conversations, ask all the right questions because you never know where things end up. And if I look at the two of us having this chat today, what we do today, we would not have been able to pick 10 years ago when we were in recruitment, right? So you never know where opportunities will take you. So if you get an opportunity, grab it with both hands. But actually, the one thing I would say at the end of it is just back yourself, because I just feel like people don't back themselves a lot. They're very good at what they do, but then whichever other person talking in my head is going, no, you're not as good as what you do. But I'm like, well, I don't need to listen to you. So just back yourself and then look and accept every opportunity and have as many conversations as you can with your network, no matter what your network is, because you never know where those networks take you.
I know. I agree. That is such great advice. And I think it's really great advice for anyone out there that maybe is a little bit stuck in terms of employment because, the recruitment and talent industry have been impacted quite heavily, or anyone else that's listening for that matter, is, look at Prash, look at myself, who we've been quite creative in terms of our career pathways and given things a shot that we never thought we would do and learnt from that and then moved into other things. We haven't been linear in terms of our career pathways where I need to be internal, then I become a HR manager and then I become a chief people officer. We've just kind of gone with the flow. And I think there's a beauty in that, right? Because you learn so much and it keeps things exciting. Right?
Yeah, totally, mate. Totally, mate. And it's funny, can I just say, I think you just touched on a really, really important topic when we talk about the whole linear thing in careers. I think it's almost like we accept in life that things aren't linear, but we're terrible at accepting that professionally for some reason. I don't know why. Like, if we're having a coffee outside, you'd be happy to say to someone, oh, yeah, look, I know life happens and I'm happy to just run with it or go with the flow or whatever buzzword you want to use. But then professionally, somehow we don't think that. I don't know why. But professionally, it's the same thing. There is no linear pattern to anything these days, I find anyway. So just be open to it because you never know where things will take you.
Yeah. Be open, listeners. See where things are going to take you. And we promise it'll be a fun ride. Mate, Prash, it was so great to catch up. I'm so great to hear you're thriving and loving work and loving life and can't wait to catch up again. Thanks again for joining me for this Chinwag.
Thanks, Eden. Really appreciate the opportunity, mate. Thank you again.
Thanks, mate.